Today I'm going to cover bipolar disorder. It's one of the most misdiagnosed disorders out there, and so I really wanted to go over this because I see it a lot in my practice with my clients coming in either thinking they have this diagnosis or misdiagnosing themselves, or maybe they researched a little bit online. If you look at bipolar disorder symptoms and you just Google it, it's really pretty much every person you've ever met. And so if you're not a diagnostician and you don't have training or any kind of background in mental health, then yeah, don't Google this bipolar and try to diagnose yourself, because it's a bit more complicated than it presents, right? So I'm going to cover on this chart the ranges of bipolar. So there's bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. So here we have neutral. So this would be normal, neutral. A normal brain has a range that is considered standard. So this would be like a normal range for a normal person. Bipolar deviates between high highs and low lows. So a high high would be full mania here, full manic episode, okay, up here. And then there's also hypomania, which is basically a more mild version of mania. Not full-blown manic. It's just much more moderate, much more reasonable, but still problematic and heightened state, euphoria and excitement. So then down here we have full depression, which everyone is very familiar with. Depression is very common, being a crushing hopelessness. Some people feel suicidal, some people have no motivation or meaning or purpose, they just feel empty. And then there's dysthymia. Dysthymia is a mild version of depression, where it's not quite meeting the requirements for full-blown depression here, but it is still a pretty chronic and problematic depressed mood. It's just much more mild. So most people heard of depression, most people heard of mania, but hypomania and dysthymia are less common, people are aware of. So we have neutrality in the middle, normal range in the dotted lines here. So normal brain is going to kind of come up, have the normal up and downs here of life, okay? Versus bipolar 1 is going to start neutral. Bipolar 1 is going to have full mania and full depression. So they have that full cycle. Versus bipolar 2 is going to have more of a hypomania and full depression. So it's just lesser on the manic side, okay? Now, if you genuinely have bipolar, you will know pretty early once onset occurs. So some people it occurs later than others. It's a neurobiological, it's a brain development disorder. There's just something off about your body's natural neurochemistry development, and everything's just off. And so it's kind of on its own clock, it's on its own track record. So bipolar brain's going to really just do whatever it wants to do. It's going to run its own clock, okay? And certain things can trigger it. So that means that normal range of those neurotransmitters, normally your brain will regulate, but here it's very much unregulated, okay? Full mania is this euphoric, excited state where you're overly active and you feel invincible and immortal, and you tend to make very impulsive decisions that aren't well thought out. A lot of people end up in jail when they're having a manic episode just because of impulsive decisions that they make, or they try drugs, or they hurt others, or they make rash decisions, or they spend money they don't have, or they do things that are pretty drastic. I've had clients that have bipolar that come in, they have very, very exciting, drastic stories that are very hard to forget. And so you'll know, if you're truly manic, you'll know. It'll be very drastic. A couple examples off the top of my head. A client just randomly went out and decided that he's a carpenter and he's going to buy $5,000 of equipment and all of a sudden be a carpenter and quit his job, right? Or just randomly change their identity or their name, or go to Disney World when they're broke and they don't have any money, or just disappear to Europe for a month or two and leave their kid at home. And there's all kinds of examples where people have these really big anger outbursts, or they're very impulsive, or they try drugs or do all kinds of things. So that's not all mania is that bad, but I'm just giving you extreme examples so that you have an idea how bad it can be. Very much irritable, angry, 0 to 60 can come with that. Okay. Versus depression, full depression is decrease in energy, decrease in motivation, decrease in pleasure, feelings of hopelessness, sleep and appetite are out of whack. Some people feel suicidal, some people self-harm. It's very, very crippling, very negative, very crushing. Okay, so that's kind of the normal, and they go back and forth. So bipolar, you go up, you go down, you go up, you go down, you go up. If you are bipolar, or if you're not really sure, I would recommend you track where you are, have a log, have a journal, and you can just kind of track where you are each day. Put it's some bullet points on a chart here, and you can kind of see your cycles and how long they last, and gain some awareness. Some people's cycles are consistent and they're predictable, and some people rapid cycle, which is much faster, right? This is a very serious disorder. In my opinion, it makes the top 5 worst disorders out there, and that's just personal opinion. I find what it does to people and how difficult it is to manage. And it is a non-curative disorder, so there's no way to eliminate it and get rid of it entirely. It's more so medicated, and with therapy and medication, we can kind of mitigate how much damage it can do, right? So with as much as I am a proponent of therapy and not medication, in certain cases with bipolar, I definitely recommend medication if you have bipolar. But I also recommend you get a formal diagnosis, because it is so commonly misdiagnosed. If you don't have a formal diagnosis from a diagnostician, I'd recommend you go to a psychologist that can do a full evaluation on you, okay? Don't just Google it and think you have it, or take your primary care physician's word for it. Or even your psychiatrist. It's good to get multiple opinions with a mental health specialist doctor, right? A psychiatrist or a neuroscientist. So I would, get multiple opinions, get a full diagnosis here before you can say that you have this disorder, because it's very serious. If you do have it, a healthy mentality is to learn not to trust yourself. It's not a reflection of you. It's not a reflection of your weakness or your character or your strength. This is strictly a chemical problem in your brain, which will impact your mood and will make you very unstable. It's a very dangerous disorder. So a common statistic, if you're male with this disorder, is the majority males end up dead or in jail by age 25 with this disorder. Dead meaning with depression a lot of the time, such it's so life-threatening because it's so deep. And then in jail with mania, a lot of the times you make rash decisions. So that's how extreme this disorder is. So it's not a lighthearted thing that you can kind of toss around and misdiagnose very easily. It's a steep diagnosis. Okay. So I can't stress the importance of medication with bipolar in particular, because it's really the only way to genuinely have a shot at normalcy in a normal life. And as much as we don't like the side effects of medication, it is better than the damage that this disorder can do specifically to your life. And so medication is pretty much mandatory. It's pretty much needed. All medication is experimental. The doctors usually don't tell you that it's experimental, but it is. They're experimenting. They have a general idea how it's going to affect you, but every case is different. So you want to be closely monitoring when you're early on taking your medication, experimenting. You want to be closely monitoring how you're feeling and making sure we're finding the right amount of medication and adjusting that accordingly. Once you've found a place of stability with your medication, perfect. We really want to leave that in place, and we don't want to touch that for as many years as possible to get maximum efficiency. Over time, your body will build a tolerance to it, which will decrease the effectiveness of the medication, but we'll have to increase the dose just to kind of keep that effectiveness going. It's worth it. So this is one of the disorders out there. The best thing if you don't have a therapist is consistent weekly therapy. Lots of bipolar people will come to therapy when they're manic, and then they'll quit therapy when they're depressed. It's hard to continue to go to therapy when you're depressed. I see a lot of bipolar people also take their medication when they're depressed because they're really miserable. But when they're manic, they don't want to take their medication. They're like, no, we're good, I'm good, I don't need it, I feel amazing. That's so classic. Don't do that. Just take the medication every day. Be very responsible with it. Be consistent. Consistency is key, since this is such an unstable disorder. We want as much normalcy, as much consistency as you can offer in your life to keep that stability going. Okay. That's kind of an overview highlight of bipolar. So hopefully that helps you. And if you have a family member maybe that has it, or maybe if you're questioning whether you have it or not, definitely go get evaluated. Go ahead and rule that out. Get a real diagnostic evaluation. Don't just go to a counselor and get an opinion, or don't just go to a primary care physician and get an opinion. Don't just go to a psychiatrist and get one opinion. Get a formal, full evaluation. That'll help a lot. Okay? If you don't have a therapist, we'd be more than happy to help you. Feel free to go to intentional-counseling.com. Either myself or a list of trained therapists would be happy to either meet with you virtually or in person. Alright guys, thanks for stopping by. If you have any comments or questions, leave them below, and we'll be looking forward to hearing from you, and see you next time. Take care.